El Lobo has a new racket, the Babolat Viper Juan Lebrón, a paddle racket in an impressive electric orange. But this year it's not alone, because Babolat has launched the soft version of the model Juan uses with just the right changes to make it different while keeping its essence. What changes does the racket have compared to the 2025 version? What are the differences between Lebrón's model and the soft? Hello everyone, I'm Pablo and I welcome you to a new the4Set. One of my favorite rackets in 2025 was Lebrón's racket. Babolat finally brought back the most successful model in its history, the one that gave Lebrón so many victories in the past, the Viper Carbon. Juan had been using the Viper since 2018 and with it he became #1 for 4 years. However, Juan switched molds in 2021 to the Technical, a racket he never really got used to. Because even though he tried, Juan always preferred the Viper, and that's why in 2024 Babolat went back to what they knew El Lobo needed. So the Viper came back again in a white and red version, one of the most complete rackets of the whole year. But for 2026, Babolat and Lebrón have presented their new Viper and the new Viper Soft. And who better than Lebrón to tell us about his racket exclusively from Kuwait?
Juan, salam aleikum.
Salam aleikum.
Estamos en Kuwait y tengo en mi mano las naranjas mecánicas. La nueva Viper de Juan Lebrón 3.0.
3.0.
Pero claro, esta no es igual que esa.
No
es igual.
¿Ves que tiene esto diferente? El logo.
El difuminado, es verdad, el logo del
el logo
Lobo
es negro ahí en la
es
soft
verdad.
y esta, digamos, en la Viper Juan Lebrón 26, digamos que lo tiene plateado con más flúor, digamos.
Claro, y esta
flúor.
es la gran novedad, porque
Sí.
habéis sacado la versión blanda.
Sí.
Más blandita que esa.
Porque al fin y al cabo yo siempre intento adaptarme un poco más al amateur,
Vale.
¿no? E intento que la pala también sea, digamos, lo más sana posible. Hemos tenido muchas aprobaciones de pala donde obviamente hemos visto que es lo más sano también para el...
Para alguien que no está tan fuerte como tú.
No, bueno, o digamos, no, que obviamente la gente amateur sufre mucho de sus brazos, que le duele el codo, que tal. La verdad que la pala es un espectáculo súper bonito. Siempre me dieron buen feedback del año anterior, o sea que de este año me lo van a tener que dar mejor, seguro.
Vale.
Es verdad que siempre le pido un poco de paciencia al amateur con respecto a mi pala porque tarda 2-3 semanitas.
Mira, el año pasado me
2-3
dijiste eso
semanitas.
y te prometo, y esto que lo sepas, es completamente verdad.
¿Sabes?
Yo la probé la primera vez y dije, ostras, no siento la bola tal. A la semana y media,
Sí.
digo, joder.
Entonces, por eso digo que, o sea, recalco esto mucho porque es verdad que al principio a lo mejor, bueno, te cuesta un poquito, pero creo que después, creo que fluye muy bien, la pala se adapta a ti y creo que es una pala de verdad, muy fácil de después de llevar cuando te adaptas a ella y después tiene mucha salida, para el amateur tiene mucha salida la pala.
Y Juan, tú siendo jugador de derecha, un molde tan diamante con el balance altito y tal, ¿te gusta más que una pala redonda? Porque en el pasado yo me acuerdo que usabas palas redondas.
Bueno, en el pasado era más malo. En el pasado era más malo y tengo que decir que obviamente en el pasado también me cuidaban cuando era más pequeño. Tenía esa pala redonda de Middle Moon y tenía mi firma. Eso para mí fue un auténtico orgullo.
¿Qué manías tienes tú con tu pala? Es decir, ¿qué le pides ahora? Decir, soy tiquismiquis con esto porque me ha ido bien, necesito... ¿Qué le pides?
Bueno, yo creo que sinceramente los moldes son muy buenos. Lo veo una pala que también recubre, digamos, todas las zonas de lo que tiene que tener una pala, ¿no? Al ser diamante para mí me da mucha confianza cuando voy por arriba, pego por arriba, ¿no? La veo más cabezona y eso me hace también que tenga más confianza a la hora de pegar, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que cuando uno se siente cómodo con algo, para qué cambiar.
¿Y
¿no?
le pides un peso específico a Babolat?
Mira, yo ahora estoy jugando un poquito más pesado, ¿no? Estoy jugando entre 375, 376.
¿Te la envían así Babolat?
Me la envía así, La verdad que no tengo que hacerle mucho a la pala, o sea, solo ponerle algún grip o 1 o 2 grips de más y vamos.
Y para adelante.
Te tengo que decir que ahora que he visto las palas aquí en la presentación,
¿Sí?
tienes tú también que decirme que obviamente no es lo mismo que se ve aquí que cuando se ve aquí, que es totalmente
persona, sí.
guapísimo, ¿no? Cuando, digamos, nos presentan las palas en ordenador, 3D,
Sí.
tal, otro, yo prefiero siempre verlas
En persona, claro.
ahí es cuando decido. Entonces cuando yo la vi dije, ya está. Yo por ejemplo pongo una pala ahí y digo, uff, a lo mejor no me llama tanto la atención o no va con mi personalidad esos colores. Y tengo que decirte que cuando la vi dije, ya está.
Ya está.
Sí.
Juan,
¿Vale?
muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias a ti.
Everything sounds great so far, but Pablo, is there any change from last year's racket? Well, there are really only two changes, the design and the cord. The design, as you can see, switches to an electric orange that reminds me of a Lamborghini, and you have to admit that on court it gets the most attention. Although obviously everyone has their own taste and some people will love it and others won't. The other change has to do with the cord and with Lebron himself, because Juan never got used to the cord that you can replace and would ask Babolat for his racket without that feature. So this year, to make it as close as possible to what Lebron actually wants, they went with a traditional cord. And I have to confess, I've never replaced a cord, but from the comments I've read, many of you valued that option and this might feel like a step back. Everything else about the racket, the really important part, stays the same as last year. That means it's still a heavy racket between 360 and 380 grams. My unit, with the exact same setup Lebron uses, weighs 366 grams and has a balance of 27 centimeters. It has 3K carbon and EVA core, which makes it a hard racket, and that, together with the weight, is not for everyone. The grip is 13 centimeters and it still has 3D roughness that for me could be much better. And right now, with the code 4Set at Padel Market, it costs 351 euros. But the big news doesn't come from the racket Lebron uses, because it comes from its little brother, the Viper Juan Lebrón Soft, a version that is different from Juan's racket for two main reasons. It's lighter and softer. It's exactly 5 grams lighter, between 355 and 375 grams. With my setup, it weighs 362 and has a balance of 26.8 centimeters. And it's softer because it changes both the carbon and the core. Because even though both rackets uses 3K carbon, the soft version uses 3K twill carbon. And Pablo, what does it mean? Well, that both rackets have 3000 filaments in each carbon strand, but what changes is how those strands are woven. The 3K carbon in Juan's version is like a simple chessboard where one strand goes over and the next goes under, crossing constantly. With so many crossings, the fiber is very rigid and stable. In the soft model, the carbon wave goes over 2 strands and then under 2, a 2x2. Since it crosses fewer times, the fibers have longer sections where they straight and float over the others. This lets the fiber move and deform a bit more than in the other case. But the difference between the carbons is pretty fine, and what really makes the difference is the core, which has a lower hardness. So with a more flexible carbon and a lower hardness core, the soft version is truly softer. The other features like the roughness or the grip are the same. And the price of the soft with the code 4Set at Padel Market is 270 euros. But once we've seen the technical specs of both models and their differences, it's time to move on to the test. And as always, let's start with the hardness test, because do you actually feel the difference? Well, the truth is yes, the Viper Juan Lebrón is a hard racket, while the soft I would say is a medium to hard, because it doesn't get to be a truly soft racket. But does this affect the ball output? Of course it does. The Viper has less ball output than the soft. It's a racket with very little ball output. And in the end, the differences between the hard and soft versions will show in play. Because on one hand, the hard is more physical racket, more technical, with more control and more power, ideal for warmer places. It's more physical because with higher weight it will demand more from you to get the same acceleration, which requires good physical condition and more strength. If you cannot move it well, it can backfire on you. It's a more technical racket because the sweet spot and ball output are lower and obviously the hardness is higher. All that makes the racket more demanding, but you can get better performance as long as you hit with quality. It has more control and more power because it's harder and has less ball output, but that forces you to accelerate and move the racket accordingly. And it's better for warmer locations because being a hard racket, if you use it in a cold area, it will become too hard. On the other hand, the soft will have a bigger sweet spot, more ball output, better maneuverability, and more comfort, ideal for colder places. It has a bigger sweet spot, so it's a less technical racket. That means the racket lets you hit the ball worse without your shot being affected. It has more ball output, so you can generate faster shots with less effort. So if you don't have great physical condition, don't have much power, and your technique is not the best, is the best way to generate powerful shots. And in many cases, it's easier to get a better smash with a racket with more ball output than with less. The soft has better maneuverability, so you can move the racket faster with less effort, and it's less taxing on your arm. And it's better for cold places because in very hot areas the racket will soften too much and become uncontrollable. Considering those performance differences, do you actually feel the difference on court? Well, starting with defense, Juan's version feels harder to move. Remember, it has a 27 cm balance, and this is where it punishes you the most in defense. Even so, with how little ball output it has, once you get used to, the control is extremely high, but it forces you to hit the ball well no matter what. The soft version moves a bit better, but I wouldn't say it's a maneuverable racket either. Although it's more comfortable in defense because with more sweet spot and more ball output, it doesn't demand perfection on every shot, but of course, at the same time you lose a bit of control. At the net is where I felt the most comfortable with LeBron's racket. If you make clean contact, all the energy transfers straight into the ball. On blocks, since it's hard, the ball doesn't get away from you, and with a bit of shoulder action you put the ball wherever you want. At low speeds, it's hard to get the ball to travel because it has low ball output, but if you want to hit hard, you can play all day. With the soft, you will generate more speed on volleys with less effort and technique, but you will have worse control. With a small volley motion, it will let you get good results at both low and high intensity. Even so, I will stick with the hard one because you can place the ball wherever you want, although it will tire you more. On bandejas and víboras, the hard one is simply impressive. The ball gets a lot of weight at high speed, although the weight and balance make it tough to handle for a match. With the high balance, if you extend the shot, the ball flies on its own because the tip is heavy. Here is where you notice the roughness doesn't grab the ball enough, but that happens with both the hard and the soft. With the soft, it's like before, at high speeds it gets more uncontrolled, but it's easier to generate more speed than with the hard. You're going to get less tired using the racket, and in theory you should be able to last a whole match with the same intensity and strokes. And lastly, the smash. Which one wins for me? Well, I smash 10 balls with each racket with used balls and incubate, so keep that in mind. And the truth is the results are very similar, with a slight win for the hard version. In the end, it's excellent if you have good technique and physical condition, but it needs more acceleration and power. With the soft, you can accelerate it faster and you get less raw performance, but similar results if you don't have much physical condition. So Pablo, who is each Viper for? If you are a player with very good physical condition, very good technique, and you're looking for a hard racket with high balance and a bit more power than control, the Viper Juan Lebrón is your racket. On the other hand, if you are an offensive player who wants to generate a lot of speed without much effort, you like medium hard rackets, and you want a racket with high balance but not as physical, the Viper Soft is your racket. So if you have any questions about the new Babolat Viper, leave them in the comments, and thank you so much for watching the video. See you in the next one. Ciao!